This channel is about gear for making music, and it takes 7 objects at a time, not 7 versions of the same thing lined up to see which one wins. 7 different problems, 1 per chapter, and the object that solves that problem. No ranking, no scores, no head-to-head between the 7. You're looking for the piece you're missing, not a race. 28 themes are already planned, covering recording, listening, instruments, cables, the room. Each episode takes 1 and breaks it into 7 slots. This one starts at the beginning, the first rig, the one you have on day 1. On day 1, the problem isn't picking the right piece. It's getting the chain to work end to end with no dead link. 1 microphone that won't power up, or 1 pair of speakers that lies to you, and the other 6 pieces are worth nothing. Because a rig isn't a shopping list. It's a route the sound has to travel. In through a microphone, through a converter, parked on a drive, out of 2 speakers, and back into your ears. If 1 step is missing, the result isn't worse. It isn't there. And that's why day 1 goes wrong in a specific way. You buy 1 slot well, and leave the one next to it uncovered. The good microphone plugged into the computer's own socket. The right interface listened to through the monitor's speakers. So there's no best piece here. There are 7 links, and what to look at in each. 3 criteria stated before we start. First, at least 4 stars on average. Not an achievement, a floor. Below it, a product doesn't come in, and it doesn't get argued for. Second, and in this bracket, it matters more than the score, the number of reviews. A high average across 10 opinions says nothing. The same average across thousands says the thing has been used for a long time in different rooms and that the flaws have surfaced. That's the filter that counts here, because this is the bracket with the most no-name products. Third, that it works with no driver to install where the maker says so. On day 1, what stops everything is rarely the quality of a piece. It's a control panel that won't start, and one criterion that isn't here, the lowest price. Savings you buy again in 6 months aren't savings. One thing up front. My own book isn't one of the 7, but in the tail of the recommended books chapter, I name one I wrote, 1 sentence, and we move on. First link, getting sound into the computer. The problem is the one everybody meets. You plug the microphone into the laptop socket, record, play it back, and the voice is thin and arrives late against the backing track. It isn't the microphone's fault. That input was never made for a studio microphone. It gives it no power, no gain, and it hands the signal back with a delay you hear in the headphones while you're singing. What goes there instead is an audio interface, and Audient EVO 4 is the input slot in this bracket. 2 things above the rest. The first is 48-volt phantom power coming down the USB cable. A condenser microphone without that current doesn't switch on. It doesn't sound bad, it doesn't sound at all. And having it off the bus means there's no extra power supply to connect. The second is direct monitoring. You hear your voice as it goes in, not as it comes back from the computer. Without that, you're singing on top of your own delay, and anyone who's tried knows it can't be done. On paper, there are 2 combo inputs, 2 preamps with 58 decibels of gain, and a dedicated instrument input on channel 1 for a guitar or a bass with no amp in between. Conversion is stated at 24 bit up to 96 kilohertz. It connects over USB-C and it's recognized with nothing to install. Then there's smart gain, and it's worth more than it sounds. You press it, play or talk for a few seconds, and it sets the input level by listening to the source. Input level is exactly where day 1 goes wrong. Too low, and you have to lift everything afterwards. Too high, and the take is ruined at the source, and that doesn't get fixed. What to know first? There are 2 inputs. They cover a voice and an instrument together, or 2 voices. Anyone miking a drum kit or a band playing in the same room is looking for an interface with more preamps, not this one. And every control goes through 1 knob and its buttons. Quick once you know it. And in the first days, a knob per function is more immediate. It's for someone recording 1 voice or 1 instrument at a time who wants the chain to start with nothing to configure. Now that there's power and there's gain, you need something to put in front of it. Second link, the voice. The microphone built into a laptop makes any take unusable. and not as a matter of taste. It sits inside a plastic shell, half a meter from your mouth, next to a fan. It picks up the room and the machine, and the voice is somewhere in the middle. Audio-Technica's AT2020 is the microphone slot, and it's a studio condenser with an XLR connection. Condenser means two things. First, it needs phantom power from the interface, so this link depends on the one before it. Second, it's sensitive, and it hears everything that's there. The capsule is 16 millimeters, the pattern is fixed cardioid. It takes what's in front and rejects what's behind. And the stated response covers 20 Hz to 20 kHz. The number that surprises people is maximum pressure, 144 decibels. Translated, the same capsule that picks up a spoken voice at half a meter also sits in front of a cranked guitar amp or beside a snare without the signal falling apart. It isn't a vocal microphone that only holds up on vocals, and there's a strength you only notice later. There are no switches on the body, no pad to remember, no filter to engage, nothing to set wrong before you hit record. You connect it, turn on phantom, and talk. What to know first, and it matters here. A condenser takes the room. In an empty bedroom, bare walls and a hard floor, the fridge, the keyboard, the traffic, and the reflections off the walls all land in the take. And those reflections don't come out afterwards. The room has to be softened. Curtains, a rug, the wardrobe open, books along one wall. Anyone who can't touch the room or records where people walk through will be more comfortable with a dynamic microphone, which hears far less around it. And the absence of switches has its flip side. Rumble implosives get handled downstream, inside the software, which on day one is the thing you still can't do. It's for the first vocal you can play back without wincing, in a room that's at least a little treated. But recording a voice means hearing the backing track, and hearing it without it ending up in the take. Third link, listening while you record. The problem belongs to anyone mixing on phone earbuds, or on the pair they bought for music on the train. Those are built to make sound pleasant, and they succeed. They lift the bass, they soften the top. Then the track plays in a car, or over a speaker, and it isn't what you heard. The ATH-M20x is the working headphone slot, and it's closed back. Closed is the word that counts. The cup seals, so the backing track you're listening to doesn't leak out and back into the microphone. That's why the first pair in a rig is closed and not open. While you record, the only thing that should reach the capsule is your voice. With an open pair, the backing track gets in, and you hear it in the finished take. The other number that counts is impedance, 47 ohms. That's low, and it means the headphone output of a bus-powered interface drives them to full volume on its own, with no separate amplifier to buy and connect. With high impedance headphones, the opposite happens. You turn everything up, and it still sounds far away. The rest is plain and honest. 40mm drivers, a stated response from 15 Hz to 20 kHz, swiveling cups, 200 grams with the cable, a 3-meter cable, which is the length that lets you stand in front of the microphone without pulling. What to know first? The cable is fixed, it doesn't detach, and it's the part that fails first in any pair of headphones. When it goes, here you don't change the cable, you change the headphones. Anyone working with them every day who wants a replaceable cable looks at the models with a removable connector, and closed back listening tires you, fine for recording, but after 3 or 4 hours of mixing, that fatigue starts making the decisions for you. That needs something else, and it comes next. They're for recording with the backing track in your ears without it ending up in the take. Because there's one thing headphones can't do: give you sound in a room. Fourth link, listening outside your head. On headphones, the sound is inside your skull. The positions of the instruments are fake. You feel the bass on your skin instead of in the air, and reverb has no space to exist in. You need listening in a room, and it can't be the monitors, speakers, or the television. Those are built to make anything sound agreeable, and they lie exactly where you can't afford it, in the middle and in the bass. M Audio's BX3 is the monitor slot, and they're powered. The amplifier is inside, you connect them, and that's it. The woofer is 3.5 inches with a Kevlar cone, the tweeter 1-inch, silk dome, 25 watts a side. Now, a small woofer looks like a limit, and it's actually why they belong in this slot. In a small room, on a desk 20 centimeters from the wall, a big woofer loads the bass against that wall and has you hearing low end that isn't in the file. A 3.5-inch cone up close lies less. The inputs are the second good thing. 2 balanced TRS jacks alongside the RCA and the AUX. TRS is what comes out of the interface, so the connection is direct, no adapters, and no consumer input in the way. And the controls, volume, treble, bass, position, are on the front, not the back. It means you can put the speakers where they belong, instead of where your arms reach. What to know first? The stated response starts at 80 Hz. Below that, they tell you nothing, so decisions about deep bass, whether a kick is too big, whether the sub is covering things, have to be confirmed somewhere else, on headphones or in the car, until a listening chain that reaches lower arrives. And the inputs aren't XLR. With long cables or noisy mains, the studio connector is more immune. Anyone working in a room where the wiring hums should keep that in mind. And there's the rule that makes the money worth spending. Ear height, same distance from the listener. Off to the side of the desk and under the screen, the difference is lost before you can hear it. They're for the first listening outside your head, on a desk and up close. Now the chain plays end to end. The question becomes where what you record ends up. Fifth link, the place the work lives. You already have the computer and it's nearly always the one you've got. What runs out is space. A sample pack is tens of gigabytes, a session recorded at 24. Bit grows every time you add a track, and the internal drive of a thin laptop fills up after the second purchase. From then on, you start deleting, and deleting is when things get lost. Samsung's T7 is the drive slot, an external solid-state unit, 1 terabyte. The number that counts is the stated speed, up to 1,050 megabytes a second reading, 1,000 writing, over USB 3.2. That isn't a number for the shelf. It's the difference between streaming samples while you play and hearing the session stall halfway through a bar. A slow external drive shows up immediately, and it always shows up at the worst moment, which is when the take was good. Build is the second thing. Aluminum shell, no moving parts, 85 by 57 millimeters and 72 grams. It fits in a pocket, and in a bag, it isn't the mechanics that decide how long it lasts. The maker states it survives, drops up to 2 meters, and there's 256-bit hardware encryption, which matters when the work isn't only yours. The real advantage, though, is something else. Libraries and sessions move off the system drive. The computer stays free for the software, and the project travels from one machine to another by carrying it, with nothing to copy. What to know first? It takes a fast port, and a thin laptop has few. With an interface and a keyboard already connected, you need a powered hub, an extra cost the spec sheet never mentions. And above all, one drive is not a backup. The safety copy is the second drive, or a service over the network. Anyone trusting a single unit and carrying it around is keeping the original in the most exposed place they own. It's for someone working on a laptop who finds the internal drive full by the second sample pack. And it's the slot that doesn't age. Unlike a computer, a drive doesn't change configuration every 2 months. The next slot, on the other hand, changes the way you write. Sixth link, playing instead of drawing. People starting out write notes with a mouse. Click in the grid, stretch, drag. It works, and you can hear that it was done that way. The parts come out square, all at the same volume, and a bass line built by clicking doesn't breathe. It isn't about talent. It's that dynamics come from a finger. Arturia's MiniLab 3 is the controller slot. 25 slim velocity-sensitive keys and 8 pads that also respond to pressure across 2 banks. Keys and pads on the same object means you play the harmony and hit the rhythm with your fingers, without changing instrument and without going back to the mouse. But the socket that decides whether this piece stays or gets bought again is round the back, the 5-pin MIDI output. It means the day a hardware synth arrives, this drives it. A controller that only talks to the computer gets put in a drawer that day. The rest is what sits under your fingers. 8 assignable encoders, 4 faders, 2 touch strips for pitch and modulation. It reads like a list, and it's actually the difference between shaping a sound while you play and shaping it afterwards with a mouse, once the idea has already gone. And there's an OLED display that tells you which parameter you're moving. Without it, after a week, you won't remember what the third knob was assigned to. Inside, there's an arpeggiator, hold and chord modes, 8 memories, and in the box, Analog Lab Intro, Ableton Live Lite, and UVI Model D, which is already enough to work with. What to know first? The keys are slim and light. They're made for catching ideas quickly, and anyone coming from a piano will be more at home on full-size weighted keys. 25 keys are chords, bass lines, single parts. That's the bracket talking, and it should be said, because you don't play piano two-handed on them. And the sustain pedal isn't included. It's the first thing you miss the moment you try to hold a chord, so count it in. One practical note on space. 25 keys and 8 pads take a little over 35 centimeters of desk. On a shared table, that's the real constraint, more than the features. It's for someone writing on a computer who wants to stop clicking note by note. With this, the rig is complete. What's left is the thing that separates owning 7 objects from knowing how to use them. 7th link, understanding what you've got. It's the problem you pay for twice, and you never see it. You buy the second piece before understanding what the first one does. The take sounds distant, and the answer you give yourself is that you need a better microphone, when the problem was the room. You spend twice to fix one thing. Home Recording for Musicians for Dummies by Jeff Strong, 5th edition, is the book slot, 368 pages. What makes it useful is the order it moves in, the room and treating it, the interface and what happens between the microphone and the computer, microphones and placement, tracking, editing, mixing, and mastering. It's the order you actually meet the problems in, not the order of a catalog. And that's why it keeps you from buying the wrong piece, because you reach the microphone chapter after you've understood the room. The other thing is the tone. It doesn't assume the vocabulary. It explains what gain, latency, and buffer mean. And in the same chapter, it gives you the shortcuts someone recording for a living would use. It starts at beginner and doesn't stay there. It also covers the part almost nobody explains to someone starting out, how the chain changes between a band playing in one room and a production built out of programmed sounds. 2 different crafts with the same tools, and knowing which one you're doing changes what you buy next. What to know first. Breadth costs depth. 1 volume across the whole chain gives every stage an orientation, and not a deep dive. So past the first year, each chapter runs out and hands you over to a book on one subject. And that's the moment to move on, rather than reread it. The parts tied to specific software date faster than the rest, because versions change. The reasoning holds, the screenshots don't. And it doesn't cover composition or arrangement, and it isn't your program's manual. Step-by-step procedures change with every version and live in the official documentation. It's for someone who has just put the rig together and wants to understand what each piece does before buying more. And one mention, because the theme touches it. If you're building this rig on Linux, I wrote one about that. It's called Linux for Professional Music Production, and it's for anyone who wants audio working on that system without going by trial and error. Said, and we move on. A recap by link so you know where to start. Getting sound in with the right power and gain. The interface, the EVO4. Capturing a voice you can play back, the AT2020. Hearing the backing track without it leaking into the microphone, the closed back ATH-M20x. Listening in a room instead of in your head, the BX3. Keeping libraries and sessions off the system drive, the T7. Playing parts instead of drawing them, the MiniLab 3, and understanding what you've got before buying more. The book. 7 links, and the chain is worth what its weakest one is worth. If you already have 5, get the one that's missing. That's how these episodes are meant to be used. And where a slot is already covered by something that works, that money doesn't get spent again, the next bracket gets taken on one piece at a time when that piece is what's stopping you. Links to everything I've named are in the description, with the timestamp of each chapter, so you can go back to the one you need without watching it all again. If the video helped, leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the next episode.